Hey, welcome back. Welcome back. This is DMCP 365, our Disciple Making University, Course 101, our Foundation Series. And this one is specifically Why Make Disciples Anyway, video number 3 in the series. Hey, I'm going to check in with you. How did you do? Did you complete all the action steps from the last video? I'm going to ask you. Did you copy the passages and then listen to God and write down what He told you? Did you write down 1 to 2 key things that you think God showed you from the last video? If you haven't do that, it's the same instructions as always. If you haven't done that, stop the video right now. Stop the video. Go back, complete those action steps, and then come back and pick up the video, and we'll be here for you. I promise we'll still be here. If you have done all the action steps from the previous video, great for you. Let's continue on. All right, I'm going to read today. This is going to be 3 passages from Malachi 3, verse 6, from Numbers 23:19, and from James 1:7. And every passage that I reference in the video, it's always down below, so you don't have to worry about that. You can access it anytime you want. Malachi 3:6. I, the Lord, do not change. Numbers 23:19. God is not man that he should lie, or of son of man, that he should change his mind. Has he said, and will he not do it? Or has he spoken, and will he not fulfill it? James 1:7. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. God doesn't change. God is the same. He's the same that he was back in the Old Testament, then that he was in the New Testament, then in history from the end of the New Testament until now, and he will be the same forever. God is the same, and we can be confident in that. I think that's very assuring. So just wanted to remind us of that. God doesn't change. He is the same. All right, the quote, because I love quotes. This is from William Booth. You may recognize the name. Founded the Salvation Army. Lived from 1829 to 1912. This is what he said. Not called, did you say? Not heard the call, I think you should say. Put your ear down to the Bible and hear him bid you go and pull sinners out of the fire of sin. I'm going to read that again. I like this guy. He was a fiery dude. Not called, did you say? Not heard the call, I think you should say. Put your ear down to the Bible and hear him bid you go and pull sinners out of the fire of sin. All right, let's get to today's topic. Let's have a little better understanding of your primary role as a disciple maker. Okay? And we're going to start with what was Jesus' primary role. Let's look at Jesus' primary role and then we'll extrapolate from there. How about that, huh? So in Luke 19:10, this is what Jesus says. He says, "For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost." Jesus says, the Son of Man, speaking of himself, the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. And then he goes on to say in John 12:27 and 28, and this one's really cool. Jesus says, now my soul is troubled. This is, he's getting ready to go to Gethsemane, and then he's going to get arrested, and then he's going to be killed and all that. Okay, this is what he says. Now my soul is troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour. But for this purpose I have come to this hour. Father, glorify your name. I want to read that again. Jesus is praying to the Father. He says, now is my soul troubled, and what shall I say? Father, save me from this hour. But for this hour I have come, but for this purpose I have come to this hour. Father, glorify your name. So what was Jesus' ultimate purpose? He came to seek and to save the lost. For what ultimate purpose? So that the Father's name would be glorified. That's why Jesus came ultimately, is so that the Father would be glorified. And so what is your primary role? What is your primary job? So think about this. If our job as a disciple of Jesus is to be like Jesus, and Jesus' role was to allow the Father to use him so that the Father might be glorified. Okay, follow me. Our purpose as a disciple of Jesus is to be like Jesus. Jesus' purpose was to allow the Father to use him so that the Father might be glorified. So shouldn't our purpose be to allow the Father to use us like Jesus allowed the Father to use him so that the Father might be glorified? Isn't that our purpose? Jesus is our model. Isn't that our purpose? To be like Jesus, to allow the Father to use us so that he can use us to glorify himself. And so what does that look like? What is our role? If you remember the story, I'm going to go through it real quick. We talked about it in the first video of why make disciples anyway. In the first video, we talked about your purpose is to glorify God. And how do you do that? How is God glorified? By people from every group of people in the world around the throne in heaven worshiping God forever and ever. And how does that happen? By God's name being worshipped from the rising to the setting of the sun by someone from every group of people in the world. And how does that happen, God tells us? By making disciples being made amongst every group of people in the world. And how does that happen? By God's ambassadors going to every group of people in the world and telling them that God is reconciling the world to himself through Jesus Christ. And how does that happen? By those who have been made a new creation in Christ doing their job as ambassadors and taking that message to every group of people in the world. And where are these ambassadors supposed to start with telling this message to the world? They're supposed to start, I think Acts 1:8 kind of gives us an example. You start where you are, you keep expanding out until eventually you've expanded to the entire world, right? So this G2R story simply means the Genesis to Revelation story is about God making his name great and his salvation known in all the world amongst all groups of people in the world. So hasn't God really told you your primary role, right? Your primary role is to be an ambassador to take this message that God is reconciling the world to himself through Jesus Christ. And as you're going about telling the world this message, you will be making disciples, and you will be making disciples amongst every group of people in the world. So it seems to me that disciple making appears to be your primary role while you're on this earth as you serve as an ambassador of the King. And Jesus has even told us a little story about what it looks like to do your job. And I'm going to read this out of Luke 17, verses 7 through 10. Once again, all the Bible references are below. Okay, below the video. Jesus says, "Will any one of you who has a servant plowing or keeping sheep say to him when he has come in from the field, 'Come at once and recline at table'? Will he not rather say to him, 'Prepare supper for me and dress properly and serve me while I eat and drink, and afterward you will eat and drink'? Does he thank the servant because he did what he was commanded? So you also," speaking to me, speaking to you, speaking to all followers, "so you also, when you have done all that you were commanded, say, 'We are unworthy servants. We have only done what was our duty.'" So as servants of the Master, we have a job to do. And when we do that job, we shouldn't wait to get a celebration and a pat on the back and hear how great we are. We simply say, when we've done our job, and our primary job is disciple making, when we've done it, we simply say, "I've only done my job. I've only done my job." That is part of the attitude of a disciple maker. They simply say, "I've only done my job." And that's what the material in this video series is designed to help you do. To help you do your primary job, fulfill your primary role as the ambassador in making disciples more effectively and more confidently. And so what you're going to do from here on out is we're going to go through 7 concepts, tools, principles that are going to help you. They're very simple, but if you master those, you're going to go out much more confidently and much more effectively as a disciple maker. So don't be overwhelmed that there's 7. You're going to see it's not that complicated, but you need to master those. And so that's what we're about in this video series from here on out. Is this up to this point, it's been a little bit of background just to kind of lay a foundation, but now we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of what it means, what it looks like to actually go out day after day after day to be that ambassador, taking the message to the world that God is reconciling the world to himself through Jesus Christ and making disciples as we do that. And not just making disciples, but looking to make disciples amongst all groups of people in the world. So let's review quickly. What was our objective? To get a better understanding of our primary role as a disciple maker of Jesus. Remember, we're making disciples of Jesus. And so your primary role is to glorify God by allowing God to use you so that you will be making disciples amongst all groups of people in the world. Did you get that? Your primary purpose is to glorify God by allowing God to use you so that you make disciples amongst all groups of people in the world. That's what it looks like to be a disciple maker for Jesus. That's what it looks like to be an ambassador for Jesus. All right. Now, what's next? Action steps. 1. Okay. Number 1, there's going to be some passages down there. I want you to write down one or two key things that God has shown you. Okay? Just one or two key things. Read through the passages that we've talked about here that are listed down below. Read through those, and then just write down one or two key things that jumps out to you that God shows you from those passages. And then the second one is, and the challenge question is below. I'm going to read it to you, but the challenge question is below, so you don't have to write it down. Okay, here's the challenge question. And you've had it before, I think. Are you open to obeying God and joining Him in His plan, even if it doesn't meet your expectations? You know, it sounds like a simple question, but that's a lot harder, a lot more difficult to be honest and answer that. So I'm going to read it one more time. Are you open to obeying God and joining Him in His plan, even if it doesn't meet your expectations? Take some time and really wrestle with that one. Really think through that one and be honest and put down on paper your answers to that question or your objections to that question or whatever else is coming to mind. But just be honest with yourself about that question, because being a disciple maker, you need to honestly engage with and wrestle with that question. So once you complete these 2 action steps, only after you've completed these 2 action steps, go to the next video, and I will see you there.